These are some documents he received from the British for having aided them in the Civil War. Your correspondence log from 1945 to 1948. The photo album you put together while you were recuperating from knee surgery in 1948. And papers I finally found from your parents. Papers you had told me about, like the letters your father had sent to the State Department during the war trying to locate you. And papers no one seems to have known existed, related to your parents' financial interactions with your mother's parents in the 1930s. Even though these sources seem so random, I have a pretty good idea now of what happened to you, Dad. And with regard to some events, I even think I know why they transpired. I couldn't make sense or track everything I'd been told, of course. Too many of the crucial actors and witnesses are dead. Too much of the documentation is missing. Too many of the events that people, including you, swear to have happened contradict other recitals or established historical facts. And yet, what follows is what I wish you could have known for yourself, what I wish you could have told me. Why? Well, the specialists tell us that since the infliction of trauma involves some inability to act, the taking of action by turning the unassimilated experience into a story seems to promote healing. What, you would say to me, if we could really be having this conversation? I've been telling stories all my life. And I would respond, but which stories, Dad? I would try to help you understand, using the words of Eva Hoffman, that, quote, only a full imaginative confrontation with the past, however uncanny, however unknown, can bring the hauntings to an end, can help you register that the awful events in whose spectral grip you have lived belong to another time, and the past is truly past. What's it to you, you might say, at this point feeling a little defensive? And I would try to explain as gently, clearly, and lovingly as I could that as in the Greek myths, I think the sins of the father keep being revisited on the sons and daughters until someone finally breaks the cycle. That's what I'm trying to do here, Dad, break the cycle. I'm trying to produce a story of the trauma, not so much through a mastery of the facts, for I genuinely believe that's impossible, but rather to testify to what can be known, what went wrong, to cause and effect, to appropriate affect around events, and to what could not and cannot be known. These are what Jody Wiggin calls the goals of constructing a narrative of trauma. I believe that the act of testifying to what cannot be known, or what could not have been known by you then, itself testifies eloquently. You once said to me in a plaintive voice, I'm trying to think whoever helped us. Through my recital here, Dad, I'm also trying to point out a few people who actually did help you. Still, I regret deeply that my telling isn't likely to benefit you much at this stage in your life's journey. And yet, by bringing certain things to light, I believe my testimony, my co-witnessing to your story, begins to restore the social order, as Judith Herman has put it. How, you might ask? And I would answer by implicitly proclaiming that no boy or girl should have to go through what you went through. This is the value of co-witnessing I tried to argue in my book, Talk Fiction. Dad, I know you were proud when I published it, but I also know you didn't read it. So I've just repeated that point here. Okay. And then I go on and I actually start to recount when they left the United States to go to Greece and what I think happened to them, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's enough for me. I'm delighted to see another friend here. Hi, Amy. And are you Amy's person? Hello. It is great to have you all around me, and this just feels like such a special opportunity. So I would love to just hear what's on your mind, what other parts of the book I could explain to you. Please.
I grew up in the East New York section of Brooklyn, which had a large Greek population at the time. And the Greek Orthodox Church had a center that the older men congregated in on Sunday.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering whether some of your father's experiences that he related to you, he might have heard from other men there at the same time that he was.
That's a really, really good point. I actually think that a few stories might have come from my mother's brother. My dad went, after getting back to the United States, there's a very funny story, I feel like I don't have time to relate, where they published about his life in the local paper, and a very rich woman read that story and decided to send him to private school. So after these 8 years separated from his father, he got separated again because he got sent to private school. But as a result, he was able to go to Cornell University and get a very good education. He didn't have much money, of course, so while he was at Cornell, he was working, and he was working at a Greek diner where he met a young man he liked very much. And and that man had a sister, and that sister eventually came to Ithaca, New York, and married my father. So that's my mother. So my mother's brother also had a set of experiences that I think were partly made up and partly based on reality, and I think some of those elements got incorporated. Towards the end of the war, my dad, by a very elaborate set of circumstances, ended up getting hooked into the 50th Royal Tank Regiment of the 8th Army of Britain. And those men, that was an advanced assault unit. So that unit had actually been involved in the Battle of El Alamein in North Africa. They had fought up the Sicilian Peninsula with the Allies. And then they were sent to Athens to fight the communists, the Greek communists. And by a very harrowing set of circumstances, my father came in contact with them. And some pieces of stories that he told, I am positive, came from the experiences of those men. For example, he says he was in North Africa. I'm positive he was not in North Africa. But there is a very interesting conglomeration of how he made that claim, because in fact the Greek government in exile was in North Africa. There was a very tiny landing strip right near the area of Greece that he's from, where they sent on some very dramatic spitting in the eyes of the German. They actually succeeded in getting some small planes out of that area into the Middle East and back. So it's a very complicated web of things that really happened to somebody that got incorporated. More importantly, and I really appreciate you raised Brooklyn. It's nice to meet a fellow New Yorker, by the way. But very specifically, my dad spent time after Cornell at Yeshiva University. And I feel now quite certain that he had many exchanges with Jewish Americans about their experiences in Europe. And I think some elements of their experiences got incorporated into his story as well. So actually, at this particular point in time, I am comparing versions of my dad's story. This, as I suggested to you, is trying to be a family memory scan. So that's between the years 2004 and 2006, what were people in my family thinking the past was like. But I am now analyzing a narrative, that one I already mentioned to you, the article that was published about my dad in 1945, comparing it to an article that was published about him in 1961 in our local paper, comparing that to a tape I actually have of a lecture he gave at the local Jewish community. The tape is from 1989, but I have strong reasons to believe that he had already lectured in the 70s, because my brother is the witness to hearing from his Jewish friends stories that my dad had told at the Jewish Community Center. So I have reasons to think that those versions are probably fairly similar. And then I interviewed him extensively in 2005. So I'm now comparing those versions and trying to float some theories about how culture influences, including he loved the movies, he definitely did some reading. So I'm now hypothesizing how various elements entered his. That was rather a long answer, but I appreciate you for raising it, the question. Great. Yeah, Linda.
One of the things that strikes me about the book and what you were presenting to us here today is that one of the things that I think is very moving and very interesting about what you're doing is legitimizing your father's stories, not as factual, but as truthful in very essential way, and allowing his emotional experience and his memories to stand as a legitimate form, even as they have to be channeled through what we know to be historical fact or perceptions from other members of the family. But I think that is an important part of the healing, as well as